we live in a really interesting time right now where our society is reeling from the momentum of a lot of bad ideas about nutrition that have carried us into a place where now, as we're waking up, we're like, where the hell are we? How the hell did we get here? And we're still dealing with the effect of this momentum. None can be probably more overstated than this idea that cutting out all the fat in your diet and replacing it with sugar and high fructose corn syrup was going to be a good switch for the majority of us. You look at the label on yogurt and it'll say 0 fat yogurt, and then you look at the ingredient, it's 35 grams of fructose sugar, or whatever the hell they decided to put in there. And we somehow convinced ourselves that we were doing ourselves a service, but guess what? We weren't. And quite the opposite. We were, unleashing all of the demons of nutrition hell upon ourselves unknowingly. We thought we were doing ourselves a service. Oh, fat in the food means fat in our body. Well, it turns out that's a bunch of bullshit. And now here we are in this world where, a lot of us have made that switch, but a lot of us haven't. And we're kind of dealing from the momentum of that. I mean, do you ever, as someone who's been on the forefront and understanding all this, do you wish you had like a time machine and you could be like one of those people who could say, hey, everybody, what are you doing?
You know what? That might I don't know if you've ever seen The Flash, but that might mess up the timeline.
For sure, though.
And all of a
the
sudden,
whole world might be different.
Right.
How many people have made horrible...
Hydra would be running the country now.
I can't imagine it. Maybe it'd be better, actually. Why is it always worse in that situation?
Fit Hydra soldiers. Yeah, man. It was... It's so interesting, but I think it's just like these different ages, like we have the Bronze Age, we have the Stone Age, and we're going through this. It's kind of part of our evolution. I think a big part of learning is also learning what doesn't work. And we are so good at it right now, like really understanding and becoming masterful at being fat, so having so much...
Hey, America, good job. We are masters of fat. I like that. Frame it positive.
And having that understanding, we have such a great database to look at. But the issue today is like getting people to look at it, right? Yeah. Would you just look at it? Look at the data. It's right here in black and white. But that's changing with the internet, with what the internet allows you to do is you don't need somebody to be the governor or the barrier for you to be able to look into this information for you to learn by yourself. And so going through what we've accumulated a lot of data. So one of the things you mentioned earlier, which is this understanding that, eating fat ends up as fat on your body. And really the foundational piece here is there's a problem with semantics. There's a problem with language that happened a long time ago that maybe I would go back and change this because it's a simple switch, but maybe, again, we might have Hydra show up. But so here's the thing. Fat, I would actually rephrase this or reframe it as instead of dietary fat, I would call it lipids or energy, right? Because fat, it means the same thing to us. If I eat this fat, it's going to end up as fat on me. But that logic is sort of like eating a blueberry is going to make you blue. Yeah. Right? It doesn't work like that. That's not how it works.
We're not in Willy Wonka's chocolate
factory.
You eat a blueberry, you don't look like
you didn't get the golden ticket. And so the issue is the language barrier, but also who impressed this upon our culture. And this really kind of goes back to somebody named Ansel Keys, who really promoted and pressed into some of the top health experts at the time buying into this without real sound data that fat is the real culprit behind heart disease. Right. And so if we just pull out the fat, but look at the fats they're using. All right. We're talking about terrible hydrogenated oils, vegetable oils. All right. Not real whole food based oils. And by the way, even that language issue, vegetable oil, it's not broccoli oil.
Yeah.
That's not kale oil. Give me some more of that kale oil. That'd be fantastic. This is corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil, which is a rapeseed, genetically engineered plant, right? And very high, as a lot of people know, it's very high in these omega-6 fatty acids, which we need all of them, but it skews the ratio. And your cells are so hungry for fats that they'll gobble that up and start to make your cell membranes out of really terrible, low-quality fats. And this enables your cells to break down a lot faster. This literally influences and we talked a little bit about this earlier, speaking to your team here, that your telomeres, right? So should I talk about telomeres a little bit?
Let's do it.
So the greatest biological marker that we've found in science to basically tell you how long you're going to live are these entities called telomeres. And telomeres are basically the end caps on all of your chromosomes, all right? And your chromosomes are basically the blueprint or printing out data to make you, all right? And so every time your cells divide, a little bit of these telomeres get clipped off until the cell unravels. Well, the chromosome unravels. And the best analogy I can give people is the aglet, that's at the end of your shoestrings, that little plastic casing. If anybody's ever had the misfortune of trying to tie your shoes without aglets being there.
Worse than tying them is trying to feed them back through the hole.
Yes. Oh man, it's terrible.
That's
terrible.
The worst.
And
you gotta like wet them. You gotta like suck
put
on
a little,
them. Make a little like troll hair out of it. Like with the troll hair used to come to a point at the end, and you stick the troll hair through, and then you drag it and hope that it brings the whole thing.
If they need a DNA sample to find your body, they've got shoes without aglets right over there. And there's some spit on it. And so these aglets, these plastic end caps on your shoestrings are a great parallel, a great identification for what telomeres are. And so you start to, as you age or your cells replicate, it clips off parts of that until it completely unravels. So that's aging. These fats have been found to accelerate this aging process, accelerate the loss of your telomeres, essentially aging you it's absurd how much faster this process happens. So that, we know about smoking, things like that. If you look at somebody who, smokes conventional cigarettes, chances are they're going to have a tendency to look older, especially if they've been smoking for a solid amount of time. Maybe they're 40, but they look like definitely they're in their 70s, as far as that skin health. And what it does, and it depends on your genetic disposition, what you're predisposed to, what's going to break down faster. Maybe it is your skin. Maybe it is your lungs. Maybe it is your joints. And so we have to be mindful of that. And the last thing is, with Ansel Keys pressing that into culture and people not asking questions, he really, in a way, kind of got one over on us. And it wasn't intentional. I'm sure he even probably had
he was
a good
almost
purpose.
a zealot of his own philosophy. When you look at it, he was very charismatic, very defensive, and he advanced himself in his career based upon that position. And that's one of the problems you see with science is if you have a theory that you can create as the dominant theory, you rise up in fame and position and title. And he ended up being like one of the heads of the USDA or FDA or one of the top organizations that was putting out the information regarding food policy for the world, just because he was the guy who had the charisma and had the passion to do it. And on the other side, there was a professor named John Yudkin who wrote a book called Soft, White, and Deadly. He was like, no, sorry, everybody. It's not fats that are the culprit of all these things. It's sugar. And so that was a competing theory, but he didn't have the connections. He didn't have the wherewithal to make his theory dominant. So even though, and then the science, if you're really trying to prove a theory, you can, like you said, go out and say, yeah, it is fats. And you just test only the really bad fats. And when, in that case, in all of these high omega-6 and hydrogenated fats, it's not necessarily the fat as much as the inflammation response that's causing, and then taking something like an omega-3 or a low inflammation saturated fat and testing that, which has actually subsequently been done and discovered to be that's incredibly healthy and restorative for the body. You can kind of skew the data. And even, I think he did like the famous 7 nations study, right? Where he studies 7 nations, but then he looked at a nation like France. It's eating the shit out of brie cheese and butter. And like, man, these guys in France are super healthy. Let's exclude them.
Right.
Let's exclude the nation.
It's the France paradox.
Yeah, it's the France paradox, right? So he's just carving out the countries that make the most sense to fit his data point.
Exactly.
And then it just created policy for the whole world. And then all of a sudden we end up in this time where everybody's taking all the fat out of their food, layering it in with sugar, and we end up becoming the fattest country with the most heart disease and the fattest world with the most heart disease. It's like it's risen exponentially if you chart, those policies of switching those foods out towards the epidemics that have followed. It's a clear correlation.
Exactly.
hopefully now finally starting to get reversed, but you're still fighting. You still fight that same thing, that nomenclature thing.
Yeah.
The fact that you're calling it the same thing. And actually there was a study in 2015, a Swiss study in which they showed, let's see here. Okay. I have the study right here. Trying to find the study here. But anyways, I can paraphrase the study. I remember in 2015, a Swiss company, they surveyed a ton of different doctors. And they've also, the same thing happens with cholesterol, right? There's dietary cholesterol, and then there's human cholesterol. There's the cholesterol levels in our body, right? And it's the same idea where people thought, oh, you eat foods high in cholesterol, it raises your cholesterol. Same as like the idea of if you eat fat, it makes you fat. Well, the body is a complex metabolic machine and process. It doesn't work that way. It's not a one-to-one. It's not blueberries make you brown and blue, exactly like you said. And eating dietary cholesterol doesn't directly raise your cholesterol. That's been proven unequivocally in the science. But in 2015, even 40% of doctors still believed that ingestion of dietary cholesterol, like the egg yolk, for example, which created this whole nutty egg white craze, that eating the egg yolk would raise your cholesterol, which just isn't true, but it's a language thing. And that even doctors, can fall victim to the simplicity of that language. Oh yeah, eat cholesterol, raise your cholesterol.
Yeah. That's how powerful influence can be. This is what he did. That's not science. When you go and pick and choose, that's not science. That's food dictatorship in a way, and the more we can become clear on this, and, I have many, many amazing friends who are in the healthcare field, physicians, nurses, and you'd be shocked. And people even still today don't really get this because we still have a separation between food and health. There's a separation between food and what you see on a hormone panel or blood panel. And those things are intimately connected, if not the most intimate thing, because when I look at you, Aubrey, I see the food that you've eaten.
Right.
Crazy, right? I see the food that you've eaten.
That's what we are.
Or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
In some cases, that's how powerful it is. And to say that it's not, as far as your physical, what you're made of, if that's not the most important thing, I don't know what is, but we shifted from that, birthing a huge industry of pharmaceuticals, and this is a multi-billion dollar boss industry. And they're not going to just overnight say, you know what, you should just eat more broccoli, and get off the statin. And I got to talk about this, man, because the cholesterol thing, because if people can understand and go through that pathway, what that actually looks like. So cholesterol, when you get a panel done, you got the high density lipoprotein, right? HDL, and you got low density lipoprotein. Did I say cholesterol though? I didn't say cholesterol because it's a carrier molecule, right? It's not either of those things. Cholesterol is actually one of the most important nutrients for the human body because it's the seed or the building block for your sex hormones.
Yep.
If you have low cholesterol,
everything that makes you go, that's cholesterol. That's the food for that. Whether it's your muscles or it's in your pants, it doesn't matter. If you're going, you need a little cholesterol in your body. Eat those egg yolks, son.
You got to get that in. If you don't, it's just, you're looking at a situation. And again, evolutionary biology, we've been consuming cholesterol in food since the beginning, right? As far as we could track back.
Can you imagine an old school farmer, out there going to the chickens and then they're separating the whites from the yolks and then throwing away the egg yolks? People will be looking at them like, you're insane.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
So this pathway with cholesterol, and so you mentioned earlier, it is sugar, and this is how the process actually happens. So when you consume glucose, when you consume sugar, and we could talk about this is in the form of high fructose corn syrup, in the form of even a banana where you're getting fructose, it's going to end up as glucose in the body, right? And I'm sorry, fructose is going to go straight to your liver, by the way.
Glycogen.
Right, high fructose corn syrup specifically. And this is accelerating the process I'm going to share with you. So what happens with basic sugar, where you're getting glucose from a food source, is that first of all, it's going to fill up your muscle glycogen. So the muscle glycogen that's been depleted, which is great, you need that. But then sugar being in your bloodstream, or glucose, is very dangerous to your body in abundance, because it's sort of like little shards of glass and it can start to tear up stuff, right? This is why you see people with insulin resistance, diabetics, losing their vision or needing parts of their body getting amputated, whether it's smaller capillaries. It really can start to cause a problem. And so your body in its infinite intelligence, after the muscle glycogen is filled, it will ship that glucose to your liver, which again, high fructose corn syrup goes straight to the liver, right? So once it gets to your liver, it fills up your liver glycogen now, right? So we filled up muscle glycogen, topped off the liver glycogen.
So it's like the two sugar batteries in our
Yes.
body,
Yeah.
which is, sugar is one of the fuel sources, but we have like battery systems. And when the sugar converts to the battery form, which is the glycogen form, muscle glycogen and liver glycogen, that's like in the battery form. But the battery, like any battery, can only charge so much.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what does the body do with the overcharge?
Yes.
And that's what you're about to tell me.
This is where the issue begins to take place, because again, in your body's infinite intelligence, it can't just put this back into your bloodstream in the form of this sugar. So it converts it. It's a process called lipogenesis, right? Fat creation. And it creates fat out of the sugar that you consumed, all right? And so one of the products that, it's going to probably get added with the carrier molecule, namely cholesterol, and your particle size might become an issue here because you're going to create something called low density lipoprotein with a V in front of it. All right. So it's VLDL, very low dense lipoprotein, which has a tendency towards a smaller particle size. And these are the more dangerous forms, potentially dangerous forms of what we call cholesterol when you get a panel done. So even when you get a traditional panel done, you don't just go, how's my LDL to HDL ratio? That's ridiculous. You need to look at the particle size, and you need to ask your physician to do that. And also, the more telling piece of that equation, by the way, plus some people just genetically have higher cholesterol, all right? And they live, George Burns years, like Betty. How old is Betty White? Like, she's been old for like 50 years.
Yeah, like 112.
She probably has off the charts cholesterol, like there's a genetic component there as well. But with that said, so when we get into the situation where we're looking at this panel, triglycerides, right? So these blood fats that are heavily influenced by sugar is the main determining factor, which are triglycerides look like. And I've seen this clinically over and over. I can't even tell you how many times that we shift the ratio of carbohydrates that people are taking in, and they see their numbers plummet, their triglycerides plummet. And they get a more ideal ratio of their cholesterol. Because again, this is something for, if we're looking at the medical philosophy, the larger picture here, cholesterol is so important to your well-being, but it's been marketed to us. This is the big moneymaker for drug companies. All right. Statins, $1 billion industry. All right. There's a problem. There's a big, big problem.
So, So, and what you're saying is that they've taken this correlation, right? Which is a correlation between these, high cholesterol numbers, and they've correlated that to heart disease. Well, the correlation does not necessarily mean causation, right? And what's really we're finding is the cause is these high sugar, high refined carbohydrate diets are the actual cause of two different things. Yes, that will create these high cholesterol numbers, but it's actually creating the heart disease itself. That's the root source. That's the root cause. It's not the cholesterol itself. It's the root source of this. And then these statins come in and they're just battering down your cholesterol numbers, which is just a correlation, not necessarily not at all the causation. It's a correlative effect, but it's targeting the correlative, effect rather than the causative effect, which is the fucking sugar at the beginning part of it. But they're making billions battering down that statistic and showing efficacy in reducing that statistic. Yeah, the statins will reduce these numbers, but it's not proving effective because you're not catching it at the root. Right. You're just treating some other some other manifestation of the very root problem. But that's a great way, if you take the, drug company conspiracy kind of line, which isn't really conspiracy, it's just kind of following the money at other people's expense, then it's a way that you'll continually be able to serve people statins because you're not fixing the root cause. You're just attacking some correlative symptom of the main issue. And that's a way that you can keep people on a drug for ever until they're done, until the statins start to erode the other components of the body, which because they're intensely, harmful and have a bunch of different side effects.
We still want to have the belief, and it's just a fundamental belief. I love that quote from Einstein, like the most important decision we make is whether we live in a friendly or hostile universe, and living that way in our lives personally. And so I like to think that there's still good intentions behind some of these things. Like people are like, I'm making life-saving drugs. But if you take really smart people and you teach them the wrong thing, they become amazing at doing the wrong thing, right? And so what if we could, again, this is what we're doing. Even the podcast medium is so powerful because it makes the education accessible and easy. And you can go and triple check me, right? You don't have to just listen to the expert. You can go and find out for yourself if you want to jump into, that rabbit hole. But right here, there was a study that was done recently. It's a Finnish study, found that nearly 50% increase in diabetes for people taking cholesterol lowering drugs. All right. And why is that? It's because you're masking the symptom, right? You're putting a Band-Aid on a huge wound, which is your metabolism is broken because of sugar, And so what we're doing here is we're allowing for this other illness to get on top of your body. And I guess this is a good point. We could even talk about the process of, how your body even creates fat, burns fat. Like, how does that process even happen in the first place?
Yeah, I think let's sum it up from the beginning. I think two of the things that we're talking about is that the body is a complex machine. And just because something is named fat, dietary fat, it's not going to come into your body as fat. And just because you have dietary cholesterol, it doesn't mean it's going to come directly into cholesterol. And whether or not cholesterol is even a problem at all is a whole nother thing. But in any case, it doesn't even work that way to begin with. And it's just it's a nomenclature issue that's the problem. And where the root cause of these problems actually is in sugar. And the policy shift that confounded this whole thing happened with two different individuals. One, Ansel Keys, the charismatic, well-connected guy, pushing this low-fat, kind of concept. And then there was John Yudkin on the other side saying, no, fat's fine, especially in the forms that we were talking about as well, not the hydrogenated and highly processed, high omega-6 inflammatory fats, but the other fats, the more natural, raw, saturated fats and cholesterols and things that are part of the human diet for ages. Part of the first thing that an animal eats when it eats another animal is it goes for the fat because, as you said, it's energy, right? So then it leads us to this point where, drug companies have taken advantage of chasing some of these markers that aren't actually, making people well. They're not treating the root cause, which is a metabolic condition from people having too much sugar. And that's this position that we're in that we're worldwide trying to reverse. But sugar now has its claws into us. It has its clasp into our bodies in multiple different ways. It's feeding microorganisms that love the sugar and are antagonistic to the body and want to survive and, tapping into the addictive neurochemicals in our brain and saying more M&Ms, more chocolates, more non-fat yogurt. Give me the non-fat yogurts, and that's starting to... It's hard to reverse. We got a lot of momentum now that we got to reverse back. And that's always the tough thing.
Yeah. I don't know if when you was talking about that, the Cadbury egg jumped into my head, man. My God. If you've ever tried to get through one of those. So, what you said before, it really does have its claws into us. And I shared with you earlier, we were talking about this, that there's some really great research that's been done that's found that sugar is effectively far more addictive than cocaine. All right. And so there's a study that was published in the Public Library of Science, and this was done on rats with no prior experience with cocaine or sugar. All right, artificial sweetener.
How do they know those rats weren't just ripping lines of cocaine before they? Did they ask them? Maybe they lied on the survey. You can never trust someone when you ask them if they've done cocaine.
Have you worked with any Ninja Turtles? Little rat. Do you have a history?
Yeah.
Do you have a
love
story?
Pizza?
And so what they did was they allowed the rats to choose 8 times per day between two mutually exclusive levers. One that gave them a dose of cocaine and one that gave them a dose of sugar water. And the results were crazy. 94% of the time, 94% of the critters became hooked on sugar and not cocaine. All right, 94% of the time. And Rick James said it, cocaine is a hell of a drug, right? But sugar is even more powerful. And so there's another part, a follow-up study that found that rats who were previously addicted to cocaine quickly switched their preference to sugar once it was offered as a choice. And so you thinking right now that you have a choice and that I can just choose to not eat Krispy Kremes. It's not that easy, my friend. Your body, we're kind of hardwired to seek sweet. This is an evolutionary adaptation that humans have, because what that indicated as we evolved was a dense source of calories, a dense source of energy. But the problem was we didn't come across it all that often. You might stumble upon some honey, some fruits here or there, which were not as sweet as today, not even close.
It's the bear in us, right? Like we got to get as much calorie in our body as we can, because who knows if the winter's going to be harsh? Who knows if the buffalo are going to veer right when we're expecting them to veer left, and we're going to be hungry as shit.
Exactly.
So, the bear in us is like, ooh, something sweet. We'll pack on some fat.
Yeah.
We'll take that process. We'll take all the honey we can. We'll max out our muscle glycogen and our liver glycogen and pack on some fat. Yeah. Sweet. And we're winning now.
And it becomes difficult for it to get burned away as well. Because again, your body's number one concern is survival. Not looking good on Instagram. It's about survival first.
Maybe you, bro.
But
I'll trade a few years for a few more likes any day.
But if we can really understand that first and foremost, our body's number one modus operandi is survival.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to that. How many people do you think, if you actually offered them that, if you actually offered them like, how about 5 years for like 500,000 likes? They'd be like,
Man, I think a lot of people would
consider it.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe it wasn't 500,000, maybe 5 million, but whatever. They'd be like,
hey,
fuck, okay, fuck those years. I'll take it now in Instagram.
Social media.
All right, sorry. Continue on. It's hard for the body to burn off this fat.
All good. Yes. So your body becomes really acclimated to putting this fat on, but very resistant at getting rid of it. Because again, it's like just being careful. It's going about things in a careful fashion. And so coming across this through our evolution, your body, we have a craving, a desire for it. Back then, we didn't have very many options to get it. Today, that's all we have. Like you can literally just throw a stone and hit, somewhere where you can get massive amounts of sugar, right? We're swimming in it today, to the degree that the average American eats about 100 pounds of sugar every year, right? A lot of that is in drink form. It's in everything, spaghetti sauces, I mentioned earlier donuts, but even we have to be mindful of the fruits that we eat. Again, our ancestors didn't have that kind of access. All right. We think that a banana is something that's normal, natural. It's a banana, right? Great source of potassium. The world's perfect food, it was marketed as. But the reality is I just came back from speaking at an event in the Philippines, and I saw some more kind of indigenous bananas. And they were a lot smaller, and they also had seeds. Like I could see the seeds. And in a way, you kind of had to eat around them. You could eat them, but it's not that easy. And it's rare that you'll actually see a banana like that. The ones that we see are, well, first of all, the seeds are like the reproductive bits of the banana. So your banana is impotent, right? Your banana already is infertile.
Nobody
it cannot.
Likes an impotent banana.
It looks. No, it's tricking you. It's tricking you. It's smoke and mirrors. But and a lot of people don't realize this, but the bananas that we see today, whether it's organic or not, they can't reproduce on their own in nature anymore. It needs human intervention because we wanted something easy to eat, very sweet.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got. Same thing with watermelon, same thing. Seedless.
Well, and the difference is, we're not saying all fruits are bad. Fruits have a naturally protective quality in that the fiber slows down the absorption of the sugar to a certain
and
degree.
Also the seeds.
And the seeds. Like all of the other components actually, instead of this being a massive rapid spike, it kind of takes a little bit longer. Yes. It adds some other nutrients. So fruit is still a much better option than these processed refined sugars, which is like the hard drug. That's like the freebasing version of sugar, where it's just like, especially like a Coke or something like that. It's just bam, just hitting you like instantly. Whereas sugar from these fruits, even though it is fructose, which is that sugar that largely goes straight to the liver, bypasses the muscles, so isn't exactly in its most optimal form. Nonetheless, it's carried with a lot of other things that slow down the process, stretch it out a little bit, and give your body a little bit more to work with. which helps,
Yeah.
which
So
helps the thing
be
along.
mindful. And also, I'm a big proponent of putting these things in the right spot. So today we trained here on it. And when I went back home, it's not like, and I used half a banana for the smoothie,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, I had the recovery protein,
Yep.
half a banana, some of the incredible nut butter, threw that in there as well. And you feel great, and, of course, some ice, threw that in there
Mm-hmm.
too. But in a normal circumstance, like I'm replenishing that muscle glycogen, I'm replenishing the liver glycogen
Mm-hmm.
through that. But if I'm just walking around town eating multiple bananas, which some people do,
Yep.
but you have to understand you're putting a lot of volatile energy in your body at one time. And so also you'll see these people um, doing these massive endurance exercise programs as well. It's just like you can't live like that where you're just kind of living and doing an office job and eating a lot of fruit, but you can still enjoy fruit. You just need to be smart in how you place it into your
Yeah,
itinerary.
totally. I mean, think about these sugars as ways to replenish things that are lost. Like I remember when I would do like endurance mountain bike rides, and after at a certain point in an endurance mountain bike ride, when you ingest sugar, it actually feels good for your body,
Yeah.
because you're
Yes.
just massively glycogen depleted at that point. So you can eat, something that's so gnarly that would give me like 10 stomach aches if I had it. Some very high sugar, like a Cinnabon or some
Mm,
crazy thing like that. And your body will just, it feels like it absorbs it in a different way and you feel kind of okay. But normally, the way people do it now is they do that at the end of their meal. So they have a
yeah. Right. The
meal that has
dessert.
sugar and simple carbohydrates and things that are already topping off all of their glycogen markers. And then they have dessert on top of it, which
Yeah.
is the worst time. It's already taking things when things are maximally full and then boom, sending you on this massive blood sugar spike, which then triggers, all of the issues that you have with insulin, your body flooding yourself with insulin to try and shuttle all that sugar, and then you get the insulin desensitization and all of those factors that start to point you towards these type 2 diabetes, train.
Exactly. I think it's such a great opportunity for us because a big thing and one of the reasons I love what you do is, and this is what is the kind of foundational piece that I use on my show as well, on the Model Health Show, is helping people to really enjoy the process of being healthy, right? So we're not taking anything off the table. As a matter of fact, how about we upgrade it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we make a little shift with the macronutrient ratio with dinner. And so we have our dessert. Maybe we upgrade the ingredients there, So maybe we're using coconut flour and some
Yep.
kind of almond flour or something to make some muffins or whatever the case might be. Or if you are going the straight Cinnabon route, make sure that you're eating maybe a lower carb meal along
Yep.
with it or whatever the case might be. But we have to pay attention to this ratio because it's really, as we've been talking about, sugar that can kind of tip us into the dark side.
Yeah, no doubt. And then also be aware that a lot of what the body starts to crave is the taste, like, and things like stevia or monk fruit, stay away
Yeah.
from the artificial sweeteners, which are super toxic for you. All the Diet Cokes and all of these things that have multiple studies showing carcinogenic effects. But there's some really cool plants, stevia, which is a South American leaf, monk fruit, which is something that's been used in Tibet for a long time, like zero glycemic sweeteners that can give you that satisfaction of like, this tastes great. It's part of what's in our hemp force, the sweetness that comes from it without using the sugar gives you that satisfaction. Or like a Zevia cola, I'll sometimes drink these Zevia colas. And it's not quite the same as a Coke, but I actually like it better because now if I drink a Coke, it's like, God damn, that's
Man,
sweet.
it hurts,
It's like
man.
painfully sweet.
Yeah.
It's like punching me in the mouth. It's so sweet. But you'll have like one of these Zevia colas and it'll really scratch the itch and your body will still
Yeah.
kind of be thankful for it. And the mental triggers will at least calm the buzz. It'd be like, someone addicted to cigarettes, getting the satisfaction from smoking one of those candy cigarettes that they used to come out, the ones that was just powder,
Yeah.
we used to have as a kid, which is another crazy thing that we used to have
Oh my
fake candy
God.
cigarettes. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
use the
Big
hacks and
league
the
chew.
yeah, use the hacks and the tools that we have to make life a little easier on yourself. This
Right.
isn't about being, totally austere like a monk and never enjoying the good parts of life.
Yeah.
There's ways to enjoy everything. You just got to do it the right way. There's ways to enjoy the cheeseburger, enjoy the pizza, enjoy the thing. And it's about timing, it's about frequency. and it's about, what you're using to compose these.
Right. We can go, in real talk, not to get it twisted, we can go off into the dark side in many different angles of this, even with fat,
Yeah.
and I've seen this done to a detriment as well. It's not, I'm not saying that and we've talked about the issue with the language, but I'm just using what we talk about today. But you could still get fat eating fat. All right. It's just much more difficult because of the satiety component. If you're eating real whole food, healthy fats, this is a big part of this equation today with having a healthy body composition is actually feeling satisfied, because there are so many diets that work for different people. But the big component, as far as them losing weight, is whether or not they feel satisfied.
Yeah.
And that's really where the magic happens, is finding that thing that you actually feel satisfied, that you don't feel like you're on a diet. And so it's going to be a tendency that more people are going to have more benefit with weight loss with the higher fat diet, because it activates leptin, right? Leptin is your body's kind of glorified satiety hormone. And if it's not being produced in an optimal way, you're going to be hungry more often. And it's just the nature of the beast. And then you've got to battle cravings. You've got to battle like, I shouldn't eat even though I'm hungry. Again, your body's about survival, number one. And if it's telling you to eat, you're getting into this battle of willpower versus your biology.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of us, our biology is going to win out at some point, right? Our will can be incredibly strong, but your biology is pushing you towards survival. And so adding in some more high quality fats. And so what are we talking about even when we say that? So coconut products, nuts and seeds, avocado, one of the favorites, olives, and then intelligently extracted oils like olive oil, for example. But we want to use that in a smart way. There is a smoking point, or a point that it can kind of shift and become a little bit more volatile and problematic. This is why we treat our olive oil better than we treat it like wine, basically. Most of the time you'll see it in dark glass bottles, right? Because it's also heat sensitive and it's light sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can break it down faster. And so you don't want to buy olive oil that's sitting in like a plastic see-through jug. All right. That's not a good idea. And so with that, and also of course, high quality animal proteins, animal products, fatty fish, fatty cuts of meat, just adding these things to your repertoire. There's some fatty fruits.
Yeah, people, it's so popular, get that lean protein.
Yeah.
What? Why?
Yeah.
Like if the source is good, because again, you are what you eat, and not only you are what you eat, but you are what you ate,
Yes.
So like if you're getting a grass-fed cow, you got to imagine a cow eating all of these greens and grasses and weeds and shrubs and little things that the animal is supposed to graze on, and then that transfers to the meat, and then you're eating the meat and the fat that have gotten all of these nutrients and absorbed it, rather than a single mono diet of corn and whatever soy or whatever fuck they put in a normal mono diet for a cow. You got to look at that. But when you have that, yeah. Oh man, mad cow. That's how you get the mad cow. But yeah, you take a look at that, and then this whole idea of lean protein, like throw that shit out the window. Like the fats are a necessary part of what you need. Enough with the lean protein, enough with the egg whites, enough with the non-fat yogurt. Like stop it, everybody. You know what non-fat yogurt is? It's just concentrating the fucking lactose. Like, is that what you want to do? Like, what is milk comprised of? It's got 3 parts: protein, sugar in the form of the lactose, and the fat. What are you saying? You're saying, oh, let's take out the fat, so we just got the protein sugar combo? Like, it's insane. Stop with the fucking low fat, there. Stop with all of this nonsense. Like, the science is there. This is not just opinion anymore.
Right.
Like it's there, it's been there. And, people are just reticent to change, whether that's, momentum, or whether that's some other kind of monetary gain, or whether, there's one thing I wanted to mention too. There's a physicist named Max Planck, and he said, a new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. And then that theory was confirmed by the National Bureau of Economic Research. They did a meta-analysis of 452 scientists who died at the peak of their prowess. And when they died, a whole new group of scientific theories sprung up in the absence of their death, whereas the people who followed their path, their papers and their peer-reviewed papers and their citations died down. But it literally took the dominant force in that field to die before the rest of the new information could flourish and science could advance. And it's just people holding on to things for ego's sake, and like at the point for John Ansel Keys, when he was looking at it and maybe he had that thought of like, fuck, maybe I was wrong. Well, if he had that thought, then everything he would have to admit to everybody that he was wrong, and all of the people he ridiculed along the way and all of the things that he had done. And that's too much for people. It's too hard for people to admit they're wrong. So it's not necessarily maybe they're being nefarious. Maybe they're just protecting their ego. They're not willing to admit they're wrong and willing to rethink and be mentally flexible.
Do you know how difficult that is for a human being to do?
Yeah.
Because the number one driving force of the human psyche is to stay congruent with the ideas it carries of itself. Like all of your ideas, all of the things that you do are going to be working to reaffirm who you see yourself to be. So for you to be wrong, that doesn't compute already. It's why it's so difficult to admit when you mess up. But it's a skill. It's something that you can develop.
You practice it. As soon as you mess up, admit it. And then he's like, take the lump. And then it just gets easier and easier until it just becomes laughable.
Do you know how many times I've said I'm sorry to my wife just this week?
Yeah.
All right. It pales in comparison to our first year together,
I was laughing. It was like last week. I was just laughing with Whitney, my fiance, just going, man, I'm so dumb. And not in like a harsh, like self-deprecating way, just being like, God, I'm just dumb. And this is not me beating myself up. I wasn't upset about it. It's just a recognition. Like we're all dumb. We're all just figuring stuff out. Like quit this high and mighty opinion of ourselves. Like we're a man of knowledge, and we're just learning. We're just learning more and getting better. And when you look back in hindsight, you look back and like, man, I was dumb. And that's okay. It's okay to be dumb. We're all dumb. We're all learning. We're all fucking making mistakes. Like, you don't have to attach your identity to being right all the time.
Yeah. If we could take on that mentality, really, of being a lifetime student, like embracing that, because that's what we really are. That's what you have to be, unless you are fighting the system, which you can't win. You can't win this. This is how we evolve. This is how we're wired up. And like you mentioned something earlier, just talking about our ego. Man, it's like, I think, and you've probably talked about this on your show before, but that separation, when you can see that it's not that the ego is bad per se, it's like it's a tool, but you can't fully put your entire beingness into this, that this is who you are, because it sets you up for a lot of problems. So the more we can create more of a separation or a different perspective to see the ego and to utilize that and to add, you can even more easily add character pieces, take them out. What if you could actually change your character, And some people do that, by the way. They're like, high school experience sucks. And then they move to, whatever, France, and they're all of a sudden they're the exotic person or whatever. And nobody has to know about what happened in your past. Like you were stuffed in a locker. Like you can create a whole new identity. What I just gave, that example, we could do that at any time.
Yep.
You can become the kind person. You can become the strong person. You can become whatever it is. It's a decision.
Because you're not who you were yesterday.
Yeah.
You're not the person
literally
that had that stuff happen. You're the person with the knowledge and with the temperance and with the wisdom gained from being that person. Yeah. You're a new person right now. The cells turn over. How fast do the cells turn over in the body, roughly?
It depends on the type of cell.
Well, give an example.
I mean, some could be 24 hours.
24 hours cells are turning, but all your cells are turning over all of the time. You're physically comprised of a new human being with new, fresh, brand new cells. You're a new person with new knowledge. Your neurons have different stuff stored in them. Everything about you is new and different. You're not the same person that you were. And when you acknowledge that, you can decide what you want to be from here forward and not let the past drag you into old patterns. And there'll be some momentum and there'll be some things clinging on to you, holding on to you, trying to pull you back to your old ways. But when you determine like, I'm not that person, I'm this person, and move forward, eventually you'll just start shrugging those off. Like when you see Wolverine pulling the wires out of his body or something like that. All right, not anymore for you, not anymore for you, sugar addiction, not anymore for you. And then you just emerge as a different person. And that's possible. We've both seen it so many times, working with different individuals, having people come up to us just from the information on a podcast and be like, I lost 100 pounds. It changed my life. People in the gym, people all over the place that we meet. we see it happen. It's possible for all of us. We're all made of that same stuff, that resiliency that can bounce back and decide to be something different. Just got to fucking do it.
Ah, say no more. Mic drop.
Yeah. I love you guys. I love you, Shawn. Please, everybody,
bro.
if you're looking for information on health, there's only a few resources to go. The Model Health Show is one of the absolute best, blending the information with the scientific studies, always dropping them, putting them in the show notes, and giving the information, but allowing you to look for yourself, which I highly encourage all of us to do. As we saw, scientists, doctors, everybody's not always going to be right. You can't just trust the system.
Yeah.
Got to look at the research and make some educated decisions for yourself. And that's one of the beautiful things of what you do is you give the information, you pull it together, but you also point people back to the research, back to the facts, so they can check it out and make it for themselves. So download the Model Health Show. It's awesome. Check it out and follow you everywhere. Where else can they follow you? Socials and all the stuff.
People could just hit up the modelhealthshow.com and all my socials there. So thank you, bro. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah, man. Been a blast. Thank you, everybody. Much love. Peace.